Hi everyone, my name is Badr Abdullah, and it is my pleasure today to present our work on analyzing the representational geometry of acoustic word embeddings. This is a joint work with my advisor Dietrich Klakow from the Department of Language Science and Technology at Saarland University. So in this work, we investigate acoustic word embeddings, which are vector representations of speech segments that correspond to spoken words. So here we have an acoustic encoder that takes a speech segment of any length and project it into a fixed dimensionality vector representation in a space such that different exemplars of the same word type are close by in this embedding space, while the distance in this embedding space should also correspond or should also correlate with phonological similarity. Acoustic word embeddings are useful for many speech technology applications, such as keyword spotting and query by example speech search. So whenever we have speech recordings that are not transcribed, or if we have languages that are not supported yet by ASR or speech recognition systems, we can use acoustic word embeddings to access and retrieve the spoken context, the spoken content in these audio recordings. But what is even more interesting from our perspective, that these models of acoustic word embeddings has been adopted as models of human speech processing, and they have shown to exhibit a human-like behavior in several tasks. So, for example, it has been shown that acoustic word embeddings have the so-called word onset bias, where words that start with the same sound are more similar in the embedding space than words that have similar ending. And they have also been adopted as models of non-native speech processing and production. And we have shown from our work in BlackboxNLP last year that they also capture the effect of cross-linguistic similarity in their representations. So what are the main differences between semantic word embeddings and acoustic word embeddings? Well, semantic word embeddings are induced from the written text, while acoustic word embeddings are induced from the speech modality, and that means we have different degrees of variability between these inputs. While the written words have context invariant orthographic realizations, acoustic words are actually highly variable, and this has to do with the degree of variability of the speaker when it comes to the gender and dialect variability, among many other factors. In semantic word embeddings, we would have words occurring in similar context nearby in the embedding space, while in the acoustic word embeddings, we would have words that sound similar would be nearby in the embedding space. So while a semantic word embedding space would capture distributional similarity, acoustic word embedding spaces capture acoustic similarity. So it's more about the form-based similarity and not the meaning similarity. Semantic word embeddings are well studied in NLP research. However, not much work has been done on the analysis of acoustic word embeddings. And this is the gap that we would like to fill in our work. So in this work, we take a closer analytical look at acoustic word embeddings and study how the learning objective and their architecture can shape their representational profile. And we train acoustic word embeddings on the English Libre Speech corpus, which is a very common corpus to train acoustic word embeddings, as well as automatic speech recognition systems for English. And we have two experimental variables that we are interested in. The first one is the learning objective. So here we have three different learning objectives. Two of them can be described as decoding-based objectives. So the correspondence autoencoder, for example, is actually trained as a sequence-to-sequence model, where the decoder would attempt to reconstruct a sample that belong to the same word type from the acoustic word embedding, while the phonologically guided encoder would attempt to reconstruct the phonological discrete sequence that corresponds to the acoustic sample. On the other hand, the contrastive objective does not have a decoder, but the learning objective is to minimize the distance between exemplars of the same word type, while minimizing distance between two speech samples that correspond to different word types. Our second experimental variable is the encoder architecture. So for every learning objective, we have convolutional encoder and a recurrent encoder as well. Now, in our paper, we have 3 different analyses, but since our time is limited here, I will discuss, or I will present only 2 analyses in this presentation. So the first analysis is about the embedding space uniformity, which means we are interested to look into how to what extent that the embedding space utilize in a uniform way. And we also look at the extent to which the embedding space is isotropic. So first, we look at the distribution of cosine similarities between words that correspond to between acoustic words that are of the same categories or exemplar of the same category. This is the blue. These are the blue distributions, as well as speech samples that belong to different categories, and these are the red distributions. And we see that except for the contrastive encoder, the distribution of cosine similarity between unmatching pairs is actually centered around 0. And then we look at the isotropy of the embedding space. We use the isoscore, which is the only metric to compute isotropy that's based on the mathematical definition of isotropy to the best of our knowledge. So this metric would have values between 0, which means minimally isotropic, and 1, which means maximally isotropic. So here we see that there is a clear tendency that the recurrent encoders tend to be more isotropic than their convolutional counterpart. However, all these values are between 0 and 0.1. So all these models, regardless of their architecture or learning objective, tend to be minimally isotropic. And this is similar to the observation in semantic word embeddings. But we also observe a strong positive correlation between the degree of isotropy and the extent to which the model is able to separate and discriminate between lexical categories or word categories. So the main takeaways from this analysis that acoustic word embeddings tend towards being minimally isotropic, and the degree of isotropy in the embedding space has a positive correlation, a strong positive correlation with the word discrimination performance. And the second analysis that I present here, we look at the representational consistency of acoustic word embeddings. And here we are interested that if we have different instances of the same model that was trained with the same learning objective, the same architecture, as well as the same data, do we observe differences in their representational geometries if we only vary the initial weights of these instances? And to perform this analysis, we used the representational similarity framework from neuroscience, and we used center kernel alignment to measure the similarity between different instances of the same model type. So for every model type, we train 6 instances. So that means we have 15 comparisons, and we compare between the convolutional encoders as well as the recurrent encoders. So the CKA would return values between 0, which means there is no alignment or there's no similarity between the embedding spaces, and 1, which means the embedding spaces are identical. So here we look at the convolutional encoders. We see that there is a tendency that most convolutional encoders will be consistent, except the contrastive encoder. And for the recurrent encoders, we see that actually the recurrent encoders are less consistent than their convolutional counterpart. But we observe a very strong trend that the contrastive encoders are actually the least consistent. So we observe a higher individual difference between different instances of the contrastive encoders compared to the other learning objective. So the main takeaway from this, that all acoustic word embedding encoders seem to be consistent across different runs, except the contrastive encoders, and the convolutional encoders are more consistent than their recurrent counterparts. So to conclude our work, we have looked at the representational geometry of acoustic word embeddings, and we are interested in two experimental variables: the learning objective and the encoder architecture, and how these two can shape the representational profile of acoustic word embeddings. And we have performed three analyses in the paper. I presented only two, and our main findings are that the learning objective seems to affect the geometry more than the architecture. This could indicate that both recurrent and convolutional encoders have similar inductive biases, and the learning process is mainly guided by the learning objective. And although all acoustic word embedding models tend to be consistent across different runs, we observe that the contrastive encoders exhibit individual differences in their representational representational geometry, and this could be and this could be an interesting finding when we use these models to simulate human listeners, because we would be also interested to see if these individual differences correspond to individual differences in our models. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would love to receive your questions.